What we thought we'd do now is have a little bit of a Q&A session, and we'll pass the answers to whoever's most appropriate to do it. And then, you know, there will also be an opportunity afterwards, if you don't want to ask a question now, to nobble people around the edge of the room at the end. Nick, would you mind standing up so people can see that Nick's the man with the roving mic? He's the, whatever that guy is. What is that guy who does the show? Oh, I haven't actually introduced our latest prop, which just arrived this evening. And as you can see, this is a splendidly blown up version of the image that's on the developer's application, which really does show you the site inside. You can actually read it. So I think I'm just going to leave this here, because it's as good a place as any for people to see it. That might just be a useful kind of sharpener of the mind. Oh, brilliant. Okay. Thank you, Dina. Thank you very much. And thank you, Ellie, and where are you? Can't see. Thank you very much for doing it. Much appreciated. Right, over to you. Who'd like to go first? Who's got a question? Yeah, one over here. Thank you.
The planning statement refers to a letter that Guildford Borough Council has supposedly written as supporting the site as grey belt. It's not appended to the application. I've asked Guildford Borough Council for a copy. Haven't yet received it. Have you received it?
No, because the parish council has asked for it as well, and we were in touch with the parish council as soon as we saw that, and they have been promised it, but it was a while back that they were promised it, and it hasn't yet appeared as far as I know, but they will share it with us when it comes. But I think I'm glad you raised it, because I think it's a really important point. You know, if Guildford Borough Council really, I mean, you have to take everything the developer says with a pinch of salt, frankly. But if Guildford Borough Council really kind of gave that verdict ahead of the application and ahead of all the factors that would need to be considered, you know, I think that makes them a bit vulnerable, actually, to an eventual legal challenge on the grounds of process. So, you know, I think seeing what comes out of that will be really, really important. I'm glad you've asked, and you know, let's hope we get to see it in the end. Thanks.
Can I ask a question? Looking a little further ahead, this is obviously what I call Plan A, or we're objecting to 950 homes, but I'm a cynic, and I don't think Taylor wants to build 950 homes, and they want to negotiate with the council and the planning, and 3 months, 6 months down the road, suddenly drop to 250 homes. If that's the case, do we have a strategy, or can we grow a strategy for that?
Well, again, it's a good question, and I think that when we did the NAG survey back in September, one of the conclusions was that, you know, actually a lot of people felt that if it was a more modest proposal, if it was more reasonable, then they might be more inclined to support it. So it's not that, you know, people have just said, you can't build anything here, you know, over my dead body and all the rest of it. The developer has had plenty of opportunity to modify their proposals, which they didn't take. Instead, I think as the thing emerged, the going up in height became more and more obvious. I mean, maybe Nick knows the answer to this, but I think if they were to go for a lower number of dwellings, it would have to be a new application. I don't think that actually between Guildford and the developer, they can sort of come out of this with, we're not going to let you build 950, but we're going to let you build 600. I think they'd have to go back and start again. That's my understanding. Now, in terms of what's our strategy, well, I mean, I think obviously we should engage as we have, all of us. We went along to their consultation events. You know, some of us filled out their survey, etc., etc. So I think, you have to try to engage and try to see if you can come out of it with something decent. But I'm not sure that I agree that Taylor Wimpey are interested in that. I think if you look at their business model and the sort of profit margins all these big volume builders go for, I reckon, it's 950 or bust for them, but I may be wrong. We'll see. We'll see what comes out of it. I don't know if anyone else wants to comment. Nick, do you want to say anything on this? Maybe just introduce yourself. Sorry.
Yes, hello. Feedback. Yes, Nick Norton. I've been involved with NAG for a very long time. Just let me move. Yes, I'm just giving feedback. Yes, just to say that if you recall, when this site first arose in the original local plan, the proposal was for, I can't remember, 1,200 homes? Something, 1,100? So the fact that the site is in some cases unsuitable from a flooding point of view has forced the developer to attenuate their objective. And don't forget also that this particular application is an outline application, it's not a full application. So at some point, I think, you'll find that if this outline application is approved, the developer will have to come back with a full application. So we might have to go through this all over again. But just because they put out pretty pictures of what the site might look like doesn't mean that's what the site will look like. When it comes to the full application, if they get to that point, then they could propose something that's utterly different. So don't be, again, as Michael's pointed out, don't be surprised by the way that the developer is presenting this. And there's a completely, as I understand from my colleagues, it's probably likely there's a completely different separate team inside Taylor Wimpey that deals with outline applications, and then another team that deals with full applications. So again, you'll have a completely different mindset with looking at the potential of the site. So yeah, but to address your point, as far as I'm aware, it's not a point of negotiation. A planning application is a planning application to be assessed on its merits by the planning officers in the council. So whilst there are discussions around certain provisions within an application, certainly on the technical front, then I don't think there are negotiations about the volume of properties that are being proposed.
Thank you, Nick. But I think, what Nick has said, it will be a long drawn-out process anyway, whatever happens. Because even if it's approved, then there'll be lots of things that will come back, all the detail, exactly how it's going to be. With that, more, we'll have to resist, we'll have to fight all those as well, basically. So I'm afraid this is, probably going to be a long drawn-out process. Unless we're very lucky, it gets turned down, they'll appeal it, the planning inspector kicked it out of appeal, and then we'll be fine. But, that would be Christmas, and Christmas. I think, why don't we take a couple, Nick, because you've got a couple lined up, haven't you?
Yeah, thank you. Before I ask my question, I'd just like to say thank you to you and the whole committee for all the work that you've done. And please keep up the good work. I'm a bit of a cynic, and whilst I can see everything you've said makes absolute sense and is logical, what we're really dealing with here is politics. And we're dealing with a government that's got a very hard target that they're getting nowhere close to. And I don't know if you can answer this or who have a sense or a feel, but has the decision to change the go-ahead on local elections, is that going to make a difference here as we move forward in terms of politics, etc., and who might get elected? And echoing the previous question, sorry, two parts to my question, whilst it all makes sense, we are dealing with a government that's against a hard target. Are there grounds for us to mount a legal, if they, for example, was to say that this is grey belt, are there grounds for us to mount a legal challenge to that?
So I'll just give a quick answer because I want to move on to other questions. But I mean, on the local elections, no, because ours were going ahead anyway. So that hasn't changed. On the legal challenge, no, I mean, they were scheduled for May, and they will happen. On the legal challenge, you can only challenge on grounds of process. If you have the right to apply for a judicial review, but you can only apply on the grounds of process. So the point about the famous letter that may or may not have sort of predetermined something is that would be a process issue, where you might have grounds to mount a judicial review on that basis.
You couldn't challenge on the interpretation of what is reval, what is not correct.
You can't challenge on substance. You can challenge on process if they haven't properly weighed up the evidence. You can certainly challenge on that basis, but you can't challenge on the outcome. You can't challenge and say it's ridiculous that they called it grey belt because it's obviously green belt. You can't do that. Okay. Was there another one? There's one down here.
Hi. There's two questions really. One is who owns the land currently, and would it be compulsory purchase? Is there anything going on in there that we could get involved in? And the second one is, have we considered as a village getting an independent ecological survey? Because it strikes me if somebody went down there and found a herd of deer, some newts, some wild orchids and some bats, which are probably all there, then that becomes a real big headache for the developer.
Sorry, I had brain fade. What was your first question?
Who owns the land?
Who owns the land, yeah. Most of the land is not owned by Taylor Wimpey. They only own the small parcel that is the only previously developed bit, which is the kind of small holding on the left as you go down the avenue when you get to Westwood Lane. They own that bit. The rest is all owned by family trusts, absentee landlords, if you like, who have given Taylor Wimpey legally binding options on the land. So, if Taylor Wimpey get planning permission, they will be obliged to sell the land to them. So that's that one. On the ecological survey, I mean, actually, I don't know if anyone from Friends of Normandy Wildlife is here and would like to say something about this, because you've done a lot of work on this. Actually, so has the applicant, to be fair, and they did find bats. I mean, rather to my surprise, they found a lot of rather special bats. I'm surprised that the bats came out to see them, but they apparently did.
I think newts don't count anymore. I think they're quite low on the priority with government. But we do have some very skilled members of Friends of Normandy Wildlife. I think one of them is on your committee. So I'm sure that they probably wouldn't worry about. They have produced a lot of paperwork for the Thames Basin, which was useful. Can I just make one observation while I've got this? Yeah. To state the obvious, if this might take 10 years, this plan, the thought of construction vehicles going up and down our C and D grade roads for 10 years, carrying concrete and building and goodness knows what, they're full of holes already. It would be dreadful.
And that is a legitimate concern, and there is scope in responding and objecting to the application to make that point, because they do have to, the applicant does have to demonstrate that they have a plan to manage that, and the whole thing can be done. I mean, Ollie, actually, would you like to say a bit more about this on the sort of, the disruption and the mitigation?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you can make that argument that the level of construction traffic would cause huge amounts of damage to local infrastructure. We do obviously have a lot of listed buildings in the area that this could cause a problem for. They do have to, if they do get planning permission, they do have to go through a lot more surveys and prove a lot more, or provide a lot more information to show that they are mitigating whatever they need to mitigate. But it is definitely a good argument to make that the levels of traffic that will be produced by the development as a whole, not only after 10 years, but as it's being built out with the construction traffic, that they're not doing what they need to do to mitigate the problems that they're going to cause. They're not improving the infrastructure
that is effectively a requirement for them to build in the green belt. So they're not doing what they are required to do. I think in the application itself, the only thing that they're planning to do is improve the junctions around the site. They're not doing anything else. So there is definitely an argument about the lack of infrastructure improvements that they're carrying out.
Thank you. And I'm not sure we really answered your question about an independent ecological survey, but I think it's about looking at the claims they make, and if we can challenge them based on our own experience, we should. So, for example, in an earlier document, I read a statement about sort of the bird life. It was very dismissive, that there was kind of very limited sort of bird life in the area. And for example, if you've lived here for a long time, you know that those fields are home to lots of wintering thrushes that come from Siberia and places. And that's the kind of thing that one can actually include if they've left that out of their account. So I think it's about having a look at what the claims they're making and seeing if we can refute any of them based on our own knowledge and our own experience. Yeah, sorry, Ollie.
I just wanted to say one other thing actually on the ecology side. Guildford's local plan has a policy P6 which requires the protection of wildlife effectively. So you can reference that policy. You can say that they're not doing what they need to do to protect wildlife in line with Guildford's requirements. There is a lack of information that's been provided by the developer, especially along the grounds of biodiversity net gain and the protection of wildlife, and even the I think it's the Surrey Nature Partnerships biodiversity opportunity areas, which they don't really talk about. So those are very good key points that you can raise if the wildlife that you see around those fields. It's a very good thing to raise in your personal objections, to say that they're not doing enough and they're going to destroy all the wildlife around the area during the construction stage, and when all the new residents move in, they're going to be all around the ancient woodland. It's going to just, destroy everything in a very negative way. I was going to say something else then, but I can't remember what it was.
Come back to you.
Yeah, come back to you.
So, on the subject of local roads and can't cope with extra traffic, I'd just like to give you a point which not many people may know about. So, I'm referring to that photo in a recent leaflet, which had a photo of the traffic from the Hog's Back down to the street at Putney. Right, about 20 to 25 years ago, I was on the road 6 days a week because I was a volunteer car ambulance service driver, so using the route a lot. And what was installed and I'll tell you where the installation was, come off the A31 Hog's Back from the Guildford end going west. The first junction is the one up there. You come down the slip road and then you can turn left towards Putney or right towards Womburgh Hill. They installed for about 2 to 3 weeks traffic lights and they put a small roundabout in place there. And so the result of that was the traffic was back to the A3 and beyond, towards Compton and on the A3 itself. And that was, as I say, for 2 or 3 weeks. And then in peak times the other way. Oh, sorry, give you a timing on that. So to get from the A3 to the Hog's Back and to Womburgh Hill was an hour to 3/4 of an hour to an hour. Then and then coming back this way, going up Womburgh Hill from this end, as you said, Mike, it was back to the Womburgh Fields up there, or at the very best back to the barn, that was taking 45 minutes to get up the top of Wanborough Hill. It was absolutely horrific, right? I don't remember any roadworks there. I may be wrong, but I think it was perhaps a disastrous experiment then, and there's a damn sight more traffic on the roads now. That's my point.
Thank you very much. It's really helpful, and of course you'll put that in your objection from your own personal experience. But I think everybody can chip in on the sort of traffic jams we can expect in future.
I am from Friends of Normandy Wildlife. I'm on the committee, and just to say that we have produced a very comprehensive study of the wildlife. Unfortunately, because the land's private, you're not actually able to access the land in the same way as Taylor Wimpey can. And we have also prepared a very long email which will go from our group. Just unfortunately, everybody who's been mostly involved with it is away on holiday at the moment. So, but we have sent a copy of the email to you, but we didn't actually get it sent until today. So you will have a copy somewhere in your file.
Thank you.
But it is in hand, yeah.
Thank you. I saw it just before I came out, but didn't have time to read it. But it's very good news that you've done it. Thank you.
Thank you. Full disclosure, I live in Ash, not in Normandy.
You're doubly welcome.
Well, thank you. I mean, we've had it all already, right? So that was really one of the questions I wanted to ask was, is it worth, when making your objection, including reference to other local developments, I'm thinking particularly of wildflower meadows, where we were promised not just the moon, but the stars and the sun, and, everything, none of which has come to fruition. And it's going to be just the same here. Are those valid planning objections?
Yes, I think they are, because the way you have to frame it is the sort of vagueness of the commitments in the application. And you can illustrate what happens if you have vague commitments with reference to your experience. And a number of people have made that point. That, as you say, a lot was promised, and so far not much has been delivered. I think that is a valid argument one could make. I think Paul would like to come in on this one.
Okay. My name's Paul Hart. I'm the Treasurer of NAG. Firstly, thank you to all of you out there who have contributed money. We've tried to say thank you individually to everyone who's contributed, but I think there's a few in the last week that we've missed. But it's been really helpful to use that money to get our message out. So thank you, and if you feel like giving, then please send us a message and we'll get you the bank details so we can keep our coffers high for the next campaign. Just on the point that was made there, in any other situation, a site of this size would be a strategic site. Really, if you look at the size of it compared to the strategic sites that were in the local plan, you look at the number of houses, it's more similar to those than it is to some of the smaller sites that have been identified around the borough. And usually what would go with that is something called an infrastructure development plan, which, although it's very difficult to hold people even to that plan, at least it means that in that situation you are identifying what's the required infrastructure that needs to go in place to make a site viable. And something that's 950 homes in a village that doesn't have much infrastructure as it stands, it's vital that we make the point through our own experiences about how, whether it's doctors or it's pedestrian safety or it's traffic, and we'll come on to flooding in a minute, if we can make the point that there is insufficient infrastructure promised, let alone committed, then we've got a better chance of the planning officer thinking twice about whether this is the right way to do this. It should be within a local plan. That's, unfortunately, the legislation is such that they can look at things on a case-by-case basis, but we've got to use our individual knowledge, which is our superpower, really. Taylor Wimpey don't have you guys. We have you guys. If we can put the reasons why, then we stand a much better chance of persuading the planning officer to say no to this.
Can I ask one more thing? I also wanted to, I never thought I would say this. I've also been following, as I'm sure most of people here have, the proposed development in Tongham. And I was hugely impressed with Jeremy Hunt. And he wrote his own individual, as their MP, letter to object to the application that's being proposed there. What, if anything, is Normandy's MP doing about this?
Well, the obvious answer is you have to ask your MP. Yes, sorry. The people here have to ask their MP. Thank you. I mean, to be fair, he did come to the meeting that was held here on the 4th of November, the village meeting, with about as many people. I think actually got slightly more tonight than they had then. But anyway, he did come to that meeting. He was very supportive. He's on the record as saying that he thinks the housing Secretary of State should come himself and have a look at the site and be convinced that it's not actually what was meant by Grey Belt. But I'm not here to speak for him. I think if people feel that they want his voice to be heard more loudly, they need to write to him and make that clear. Because MPs respond to what's in their postbag, as our ex-MP who's sitting in the second row here can testify. If people here feel that they want to hear more from our MP at the moment, drop him an email.
I live in Glaciers Lane. Newspapers love a good story. What's the possibility that something could be leaked to one of the national papers to say this is Taylor Wimpey's dirty tricks and we don't like them?
You're talking about the Yorshout stuff, yeah? You're talking about the fact they're trying to drum up spurious.
Yes,
yeah.
What they're doing. They're trying to get people to vote objecting when they don't even know what they're objecting to. And newspapers love that story.
Okay, well I do know as a matter of fact because somebody told me that they had approached the national newspaper with the story. So who knows? It's not unique. I mean, it's happened in other places. So it may not be of sufficient interest. I don't know. I mean, I do think the whole state of the planning system and the way that big developers seem to be the ones with the loudest voice. I do think that's an issue. But on the sort of particular dirty tricks, as it were, I think people are doing their best to try to get interest, but you can't guarantee that it's just going to get taken up. I hope if the Guildford Dragon does something on it, maybe the local BBC will pick it up as well, and that might get a little bit of traction. But to be honest, it's more important to focus on the arguments that relate to policy. This is, in a way, a distraction. If they want to play their silly games like that, let them do it. The thing that's actually going to sink the application is really well considered, well argued, things that link back to planning, both national and local planning policy. And they can do what they like. It's not actually going to make any difference.
Good evening. Can I just echo the sentiment of the gentleman that just said thank you very much to you all for your efforts in putting this together generally and organising this evening as well. Couple of points. Firstly, I have actually written to our MP, and I did get a response, I forget, autumn time last year. It was fairly ambivalent, I would say, at the time. I don't know whether the position has changed or whether he was just sort of waiting to make a judgment later on, but I have written, and I would encourage everybody else to do so as well. And my other point is that the signage boards that are around the village, whilst I recognise that the actual biggest effect we can all have is in terms of our own objections, but I think the signage boards are a good visual representation of how people feel generally, and I think the more there are, the better. I don't know if it's a constraint financially, Paul, or whether it's a resource issue in terms of people putting them up, but certainly, just for example, if every single one or household in this room put one of those up, there would be a very strong visual message to any councillors or anybody else driving through the village on a daily basis. So I, for one, would be happy to pay for one if that's a constraint, and I'll talk to Paul about what else we can do to help and support financially, but I just think that if that's a possibility, I think it should be considered aside of the actual objections, just to give a more powerful visual message as well.
Thank you very much. And I think linking to Alan's point, I think it might be quite a good photo opportunity for a journalist actually to come and take some pictures. So we'll work on that as well. Thank you for that.
I had a quick question with regards to the traffic management plans. I believe that they're proposing to install some traffic lights onto the key junctions. And I wondered if a possible objection or a valid objection would be around the pollution that would cause and the impact of the quality of air. Because I expect that at rush hour and peak times that would be quite drastically different to what it is today.
Thank you. Anyone like to take that? Just like you.
I shall give it a go. There probably is. I mean, I would give it a go. By trade, I'm a highway engineer, so I don't deal with the noise and air quality, but I do see your point, and it probably is a valid one with cars idling at red lights. So I don't know how much weight it would carry. If you can relate it to a policy in Guildford's local plan, probably noise and air quality. I'm sure there's bound to be a policy in there somewhere. Then I think if you can frame your argument about that and say that they're failing to meet their obligation, they will have to carry out further assessments as they go through the reserve matters process, and a lot of that will also be a lot of surveys and say what they're going to do to mitigate it. Yes. Construction environmental management plan. Yes, I don't know much about that either. So the only thing, or one other thing that I would probably say is, I would encourage you, obviously, as we all have, to put your objections in. Make them personal to yourself. Don't make them personal to the developer. So don't criticise them. Don't badmouth them. I wouldn't use kind of anything that you hear in the press about them in particular, because you then run the danger of it being thrown out, your objection just not going online.
Sorry, is it okay to say that you raised something at the consultation with Taylor Wimpey and it has not been taken into account when you've seen the plans?
Definitely, yes. Yeah.
Right, we've got a flood risk and drainage expert here. Well, I'd like some questions on flooding, please.
Can I just ask a separate?
Yeah, of course, yeah. Go ahead.
The first one is being an outline application. I'm aware there's 5 headings that normally you can apply under, one being access, layout, appearance, that sort of thing. Do you know which ones, firstly, they've applied under, and are we best focusing our objections against those points? And my second question is, do we know how many homes are in Normandy currently? So if we are to go back to Guildford Borough Council and say, it's an increase of 30% or 300%, obviously that's a very different argument, isn't it?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear that. Something went wrong with the mic.
The whole thing, or?
No, the second
bit was to do with number of houses in Normandy.
Yeah.
Currently, just so we can say whether there's
I see.
an increase of 30% or 300%.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously, that's got a very different argument.
No. Sorry, that one's fairly easy. I'll ask Nick, who might like to do the first half. The second half's quite easy. I mean, I think the figure's about 1350 dwellings in Normandy at the moment, and the population is about 3,150. It's quite easy to remember because it's 1, 3, and 3, 150. And this is going to be another 950 on top of 1350. And so whatever, another 2,000 people probably on top of 3,150. So it's a massive scale increase. I mean, the data is there for that. But Nick, can you do anything on the on the technicality of the nature of the outline application. I mean, it is there it's all there in the preamble, I think.
No.
Don't ask if you don't
I
want to.
think you're asking me a
No,
question.
I think honestly, if you look at the preamble to the application on the website, they make it clear there. And usually for these outline applications, there are some things they have to include, of which access is one. So they have to say how the site will be accessed, but they will obviously try and say as few things as they have to in the outline stage to give themselves maximum wiggle room for all the things that come down the line afterwards. So I think we do know what we're dealing with is the short answer to your question. Paul?
And just to build on that in terms of where you can focus your efforts when you make your presumed objection, what we really should do is try and focus on the national legislation, which, because of the situation that we're in with something called tilted balance, there's not enough land supply, so therefore what is in the local plan and the local policies has less importance, and the national policies have more importance. So what we would recommend is, if you want to get into the technicalities of reading up or talking afterwards about whether this is grey belt or not, please have a go. Then you're talking about whether the flooding risk has been adequately mitigated by what they're doing. So Caroline will talk about that in a minute, but what I suggest is reading through the flood risk assessment and then using your own experience of walking around this place through most of the winter to call bullshit on some of these assumptions that they're making as it stands, because that increases the risk about what will happen when you concrete over pretty much half of the site. You're then getting into the an argument that says it's all well and good, this might be grey belt, but don't worry, they would say it doesn't undermine the purpose of the rest of the green belt in Guildford Borough when you look at that as a whole. And I think the point to make there is, well, this site is a very large site, which is halfway between Ash and Tongham, which is the second biggest urban area in Guildford Borough Council, and Guildford. It's almost like a keystone site. Kind of done the measurements, and it's about 14% of the distance between the edge of Ash and the edge of Guildford when Blackwell Farm is Blackwell Farm is built. So what you say there is, well, if you can build on here on a case-by-case basis, what's to stop the other applications, which we know people are trying to do? You can see that in Ash already with what's going on off Boyles Road. There are other places that have been identified, and if this gets approved, then there's a risk that they will, and pretty quickly, the green belt between Ash and Guildford is under threat. So that's another area. But the biggest thing we can do is challenging the idea that this site is sustainable, yeah, and that there's it's back to the infrastructure. So it's, if you do use the train, when do you use the train? Why do you use the train? When don't you use the train? Make the case that it's all well and good having a train station here, but it's too far away or it's not useful for all of the needs. The conclusion there is cars are going to be the way that people get from A to B in this this site. So it's the wastewater. You come back to those things that say this site is not sustainable because, and we've got the knowledge to basically undermine what they've said in their application and increase the risks that we'll be facing if they were to build this in future.
Before we take another question, and I don't want to let this go on for too long because people will get tired, and we will have a more informal session afterwards where you can come and ask questions of particulars. But I'm just going to give the mic to Caroline, who, because I think we touched on a lot of the issues around flood risk and drainage, and maybe you'd like to just add a little bit to that.
My question was about flooding anyway, so that's good. I'll wait.
Yeah, so obviously everyone knows that we've got a bit of a flooding problem in Normandy. So the Taylor Wimpey have submitted a flood risk assessment and a surface water drainage strategy to accompany the planning application. And what they essentially have to do is demonstrate that the site will not make flooding any worse downstream in the surrounding areas or to the development itself. And from looking at the information, I don't think they have sufficiently demonstrated that they will be able to achieve this. There's a few sort of more technical points sort of that's thrown up as reading the information. So if anyone is interested, please do come and speak to me afterwards, and I can give you a bit more technical information if you want it. But I just wanted to say that I think one of the most powerful things that you can do is to talk about your own experiences, talk about historic flood events in the village, think how you have been impacted, how other people have been impacted. If you can try and pinpoint where the sort of flooding occurred, if you can provide pictures or videos or dates, that would just, I think that would be really, really powerful, just to really demonstrate that flooding is such an issue in this area. The developer has provided their own flood modelling in order to try and demonstrate that they're not going to build in areas that are at risk of flooding. Obviously, there are limitations to modelling. You can only model what is predicted to happen. You can't model what is actually going to happen. And so being able to demonstrate what has happened in the past, which, you know, with climate change and things like this, is only going to potentially get worse. I think it'd be really powerful if, you know, if you can just make sure that you demonstrate that in your objections. And yeah, just sort of, yeah, just pictures, images, dates, if we can demonstrate that it is happening on a regular basis. Because it's worth noting that what is considered a high risk in terms of surface water flooding is an event that happens once in every 30 years. And we all know that there are often flood events that happen more than once a year. So I think it's really powerful if we can try and demonstrate just how regularly this happens and what the impact is going to be when they've got additional infrastructure, additional houses that are potentially not, it's not necessarily just going to be what's going to impact the houses that are already there, but the houses that are going to be built as well. So yeah, I'd really just encourage you to do that if at all possible. And yeah, if anyone wants to come and hear some other technical, slightly more technical points that you can make in your objections, please do come speak to me afterwards.
Caroline, was there a particular area where images of flooding would be really valuable to have?
Anything, especially anything particularly on the site itself. So obviously the station, we all know the station floods on a regular basis. Public rights of way as well. I think we all know that, you know, some of that the site is pretty much impassable in winter because it's just so boggy. One of the other things that I've noticed is that the application for the SANG has also got quite a lot of surface water flooding on it. And if people are expected that's where they're going to be walking their dogs or going for family walks, is it going to be passable? Is it even going to be usable in the winter? Have you got examples, pictures, images of you know, times that it's flooded there? So I think the site itself, obviously, we all know that Glaziers Lane and Westwood Lane, the sewers surcharge on a regular basis and back up into people's homes. So I think anything from the local area is important. Anything from the site itself as well, I think would be really powerful. Because if it's an area that the developer hasn't been able to demonstrate is a modelled risk of flooding, it would add to the argument that the modelling is not sufficient.
I'll just add to that. I recommend you look at one document to start off with in the submission, which is the first flood risk assessment document that is on the planning application website. You will see in there a couple of maps, which is Taylor Wimpey's flood risk assessment modelling of where the river water, the fluvial water, and where the surface water is. Have a look at that, and then use your own experience to challenge the assumptions that are in there. Because there's just one example here. So there's a particular comment. It's in 5.2.7. And the statement says, the majority of the flooding this is surface water, the majority of the flooding is restricted to the existing surface water ditch network. Well, I'm sure most of you can give examples of water coming into your house, shit coming back up because it's mixed up with the water course, the water course and the foul water have mixed up, and just walking your dog. You'll be able to bring your experiences to say, we distrust, we challenge the base assumptions that you're using on the flood risk assessment.
Thanks. Was there a question? Did I stop somebody from asking a question about flooding? In which case, all yours.
No, it was along the lines, and actually, I mean, just the local area, we're on Guildford Road, and we've had the fire brigade out multiple times in the last couple of years due to flooding that's happened on a set of our houses, and part of that is linked to the sewage network backing up and filling up through manholes and all kinds of things like that flows down. So, yes, I wanted to make sure that it was appropriate to include that information. It sounds like it is.
Definitely, and I'm sure you will. Ollie.
Probably one final point from me. One of the best things that we can do is make the site unfeasible for the developer. So what I mean by that is you can make the site so expensive to build out that it's no longer profitable for them. So if they can't build on the majority of the site because of the ancient woodland, because of the flooding, because of all this, if they've got to provide so many improvements to the infrastructure, that the cost of building out the site is so expensive that they can no longer do it, then that's a very good thing.
But to that point, wasn't there a development in Billingshurst where Thames Water essentially could not fund the upgrade needed to that network, which stalled the development of that? Is that something that's relevant to this?
So Thames Water have come back and responded to the application and said they don't have sufficient capacity in their network to take it, which I think we're all not surprised about. The problem is that Thames Water are not a statutory consultee to a planning application. They have been consulted by Guildford Borough Council and they have provided their feedback, and they've said that they cannot support the proposals with the current infrastructure available. So they will need to make network upgrades in order to be able to accommodate the new development. So I think they've said that it could take up to 36 months. I think that's what they said, in order to go from design and modelling of what upgrades are required to actually building them out. I think they've also put forward a condition on the planning application that if it was to go ahead, the houses couldn't be occupied until sufficient capacity has been demonstrated, or work with the developer to do a phasing plan in order to make sure that no development is brought forward unless there is capacity available. I think one other point that I have noticed from, so I went to the Normandy Flood Forum in January, and Thames Water were there, and there is only a foul network in Normandy. It's not a surface water network, it's a foul network. So they were making the argument that the water shouldn't be getting into the foul network from the surface water, but it clearly is because it's getting in through the manholes. But having looked at their sewer records, they're actually showing quite a significant number of houses to the south of the railway line, at the bottom of Blaziers Lane where it turns into Fletchford Road. They're actually connecting surface water into the foul network. Yeah, so there are a significant number of, and we've got physical proof as well that those houses are connecting into the foul network. So it's not just a question of making sure that they make the upgrades based on their assumptions, it's making the upgrades based on what is actually happening in reality. Because the last thing we want is, they can do their modelling and say exactly what upgrades are required, but we need to make sure we demonstrate, we sort of make it clear to them that in sort of the worst case scenario, all this floodwater is getting into the network. So you can say, oh, this is how much we need in order to create the development. Are they considering all the additional floodwater that could get into the network as well? So I think it's going to be really interesting to see what responses come back from Guildford about the conditions for the Thames Water's network, and just see where it goes from there. Because, there are examples of other areas where it's having to have alternative solutions and things like that to get rid of the foul. So yeah, I think if we can really focus on the sewage network and the foul network and demonstrating that it's already at capacity, is Thames Water going to be able to deliver those infrastructure improvements? I think that's a very important point to make.
Thank you.
Mike,
Just a couple of things. Sorry, Nick.
can I just make a technical point that
Yeah.
we've said a lot about photos are really good. If you are going to object with photos, you need to email your objection. That's really important. That's the only way.
And just following on from that, something that I meant to mention before, but it's really important. If you are using the online form, if you are putting your objection into the online form on the Guildford portal, do save your work before you press submit, because very often it's a very clunky website. It's well worth, I would suggest, creating your objection in a separate document and saving it, and then you copy it in and press submit, and then you won't lose it. Because actually there have been reports, and it's happened to me over the years, so I know that there have been reports more recently of that happening to people. So that's important. One other thing I want to say while Nick is getting into Dina is just to remind you that this is the first of a series of events. I mean, this is the biggest, but we are regularly at the Chatty Cafe here on a Tuesday in the cafe over the way. We're also going to have 2 pop-up sessions at the Friday market this Friday and next Friday from 9 o'clock, I think, until 1, something like that. So if people want help, want to sort of get a little bit more help about how do I actually frame this? How do I know what I want to say, but just help me to sort of use the right language or get linked back to the right policy, whatever it is. There will be those opportunities. Chassis Cafe on Tuesdays at 2:30, I think. Martin is your host for those, and Rachel here is your host for the market pop-ups. So there will be other opportunities between now and that deadline. Okay, I think we're just going to take a couple more because I didn't want to keep everybody sitting on their seats for too long. But if there are a couple more questions before we break up into less formal mode, please go ahead. There's one at the back. Sorry, Dina first, and then come in.
I just wanted to inform you that historically, whenever I had a text that's written in Word and then you copy and paste it onto the website, it loses the formatting. So it's that clunky. I think the best option really is emailing.
Or maybe create it on the form, but then copy it into a separate document and save it in a separate document.
That's
So if you actually lose it when you submit, you can still go and get it. Yes, you're right. And all these sort of huge paragraph breaks, which are not in the original. So create it on the form, but make sure you copy it. You copy it and save it somewhere else before you press submit. That's the message. Vicky.
Will Taylor Wimpey have to actually pile the homes because it's very clayey and we have a huge problem with subsidence?
Well, where's Steve? Steve, I've got a man here who can answer that for you.
Hello. So the report so far is very silent on the construction details. This will come later on. But I think you're right. There will be considerable piling required, particularly for the 14-metre high buildings. And then that brings in the vibration issue. And so I think those that have shallow foundations, whose properties are close to the development, you should mention that. You should major on that. And bring it into your conversation.
Thanks, Steve. Thank you. Is there anything else? A last question. Yeah, there's one. Okay, we'll take 2. Take one there and then one down the front.
Well, this is not a question so much as just to endorse I live in the upper part of Westwood Lane, where we are relatively dry. But the house that was built opposite to us 20 years ago, they had to pile drive 45 feet in order to get the foundations to be stable. So what will happen in the rest of the village, God only knows.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Last one down here.
You're going to get VPS. A very quick sort of process question. Thank you for all the sometimes self-made, otherwise professional experts on the panel. You reel off all these regulations, these type B-type output from the green belt, all that stuff. Now, I've spent more hours than I wish to have done, and you've spent thousands more hours than you wish to have done wading through policy and legislation. And every time you find something else. And so it's a fantastically complicated area, especially the traffic stuff. What value is in us as lay people going through that lot in order to quote the appropriate bit of the National Planning Framework, or whatever it happens to be, compared to a slightly more emotional response from local knowledge, as you've stressed all the way through?
So I think the answer is that you could safely stick to this, but illustrate it with your own knowledge and your own experience. As we said in the article on the website, you really don't have to be, I take my hat off to you for having a go, and I know what it's like, and Paul has given up most of his life to trying to become an expert in, he's actually a money person, he's our treasurer, but he's also becoming a planning expert. Spending hours reading all this stuff, it's mind-numbing, and it is very, there are professional people who do this, and the parish council have submitted a really, really good objection based on input from a professional planning consultant. So I wouldn't worry that you can't get your head around it all. We've tried to give you the basic architecture, what we think are the main areas, and if you can fit it in more with what you know, based on your own experience, that's going to be the added value of having something from everybody in this room, I think.
And your experience isn't emotion, it's experience. The planning officer wants people in the local community to bring that knowledge because they won't get it, certainly won't get it from the applicant. It's an adversarial thing. It's they're trying to get it through. We need to defend it, but where you're bringing your own knowledge, that's by no means emotional.
Okay. Is there one more there? I'm slightly prejudiced in this, but...
So, for the interest of full disclosure, I'm married to Mike, but I've felt for the last, I don't know how long, but actually he's married to NAG. But I just wanted to say to everybody here, you would be astonished if you knew the hours that this committee and their helpers, and there are a number absent, had spent on this. I mean, it's gobsmacking because a number of you have full-time jobs. And I know thanks have already been said, thank you for those who thanked, but a salute to the professionalism and the commitment and the expertise that you've brought to this over the weeks and months that you spent looking at it. Fantastic. And guys here, do use their expertise because they are complete, knowledgeable on all the detail that we can't possibly be on. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. I really didn't put her up to that, promise you. Thank you all very much for coming. It's been really heartening for us, actually, to see so many people here and how much it matters to you to come out on a rotten evening like this. So thank you. What we will now try and do is position ourselves around the room. So if anyone would like to say, and maybe the one table I should highlight, which I think Paul and David are going to be at. Where are you going to be? Have you got one? There, that one there will be the one if anybody wants to, the sort of nuts and bolts help with how do I submit an objection. But Caroline, Ollie, Steve, who's there, Nick over there, other Nick up here, will also be available if you want to just sort of talk to them or bend their ears. But thank you all very, very much for coming. We can overcome, folks.